where people feel they belong. In this time of significant change and debate around workplace inclusion, we're bringing you the perspectives and the practical solutions that matter. It's about real people and real impact. Each month, I sit down with change makers who are navigating these complex waters of life and work. We dive deep into what's working, what isn't, and what's next in leadership and life. I invite you to be part of this important conversation. Drop your comments and questions and insights in the comments section, and we'll address them during the show and continue the discussion afterwards. Your voice matters in shaping the future of work. I can't wait for you to meet today's guest. Well, good day, everyone. We are live across LinkedIn and YouTube and Instagram, and I am thrilled to welcome my guest today, and she is Valerie Marsh. Now, Valerie and I met, probably 4 or 5 years ago, I think.
Yeah, at least, yeah.
Not in the before times, but in the during times.
Yes, in the during times, you're right, yes.
Of the pandemic. And we were doing some work with your organization. And of course, the minute I met you and you said learning and development, I was like, you are my people.
We definitely were each other's people, that is for sure.
We were. And I just kept in touch off and on over these past 4 or 5 years. And here we are. So I'm really excited about our title today about talking about how neurodiversity transforms workplace learning. Yeah. But first, can you tell us a little bit more about your background and what we ought to know about you?
Absolutely. So my current position, I'm the Senior Director of Learning and Development for a company called Jushi. We're a multi-state operating, vertically integrated cannabis company. So that means that we cultivate, manufacture, and retail in the cannabis space. I've been in this space for 7 years now, but I've been in corporate learning and development for over 30. So as I tell everyone, this is real. I didn't go to the salon for this. And it is just my passion. It is what I love so much. And I got into learning and development, I think, as most people do, on accident as well. It was one of those things where somebody tapped me on the shoulder, right? Will you build? And I worked for then the car company Saturn, and I was asked to build their new employee onboarding for customer service. And I had never done anything like that before, but I just dove in. I loved the company and the product and all of that. And since then, even the couple times I've tried to leave L&D because of its instability, I seem to just get sucked right back in. And then 25 years ago, as you know, I adopted a baby girl. And she's incredibly neurodivergent. And so our path, I say she's been my biggest teacher over the past 25 years, has really helped me see how my concepts of learning, both in the secondary world, so I've never been a secondary teacher, but I've worked in the post-secondary world, how that education space can be challenging for someone who's neurodiverse. But then as she's grown, seeing that you don't become non-neurodiverse once you become an adult. So it's something I've become incredibly passionate about, and that I'm working towards really getting the word out that, like the title says, if we really develop our training with neurodiversity in mind, it benefits every single learner that we have.
It sure does.
Yeah, it's not just about making it more inclusive, it's making the training more accessible to everyone and making it so that the training is actually consumed in a way that ensures retention of the information and proficiency of the knowledge that's needed, which I think is what we all want in the L&D space.
Yeah, I think it is. It's so interesting to me, having also been an accidental learning and development person and organizational development and all the things.
Yes.
You come into it, and one of the things I had to learn way back when was not everybody learns the same way you do, or not every technique is effective. Exactly. Before we go too deep into that, can you describe or put in plain language for us, what is neurodiversity? We're hearing a lot more about it.
Yeah.
I think people may have a number of different reactions to it, everything from to that's this or this or this, but really it's probably broader. So tell us about that.
I think what I hear often is neurodiversity is most commonly tied to the autism spectrum disorder. And it's much, much broader than that. So neurodiversity, the term was coined in the late 90s. And so it hasn't actually been around that long, really.
Right.
And it's really kind of I feel, come into the mainstream in maybe the last 10 to 15 years-ish.
Right.
Right. It's not even been
Yeah.
since the early 2000s. Like, we're just talking about maybe the last 10 years or so.
Right.
So what I think is so important is realizing that neurodiversity, yes, it absolutely includes those on the autism spectrum, on the autism spectrum, excuse me, but it also includes things like dyslexia, which a lot of people are familiar with. But other ones that people aren't as familiar with are things like dyscalculia, which is a math challenge within the brain, or dysgraphia, which is a writing challenge, or even things like central auditory processing disorder, which I always tell people, think about it as dyslexia for hearing. So someone who has central auditory processing disorder, their hearing is fine. So if you take them for a hearing test, it's perfect.
Okay.
But what happens is when the information enters the brain, it gets scrambled.
Okay.
And it's not like mishearing something, right? So a lot of times someone says something and you say, like, they might have said, the cat sitting on the mat, and you said, you have a fat cat? And like, no, that's not what I said. But those things sound the same, right?
Right.
Someone with central auditory processing disorder, you might say the cat is on the mat, and they'll hear something like, there are dogs in Italy, right? Like, the brain completely shifts what's happening. Wow. It usually happens because they're sitting in a space where there's a lot of other noise happening. So let's say like a classroom, especially in the college space, you've got 200, 300, 400 students in a class, right? So someone with central auditory processing disorder, that professor is rows and rows and rows away from them. Yeah. All of the people between them and that professor also may be talking to each other, may have something, on their computer. And so the brain is picking up all of that data and then processing it together, right? So I think a lot of these things people don't realize are included in that. So sensory processing disorder, for example, folks that have that tend to see, not only just process data faster, but their senses are processed faster. So they hear more, see more, smell more, taste more, feel more, right? So those are the kids that you hear about oftentimes that can't have tags in their clothing, or can't wear socks, those kinds of things, right? But again, while sensory processing issues tend to at times get better as people age a little bit, they never really go away. So you might still have adults, right, who things like lighting can affect their ability to learn. The temperature in the room can affect their ability to learn smells. So if they're sitting somewhere near a break room or a cafeteria or something, that can be really disruptive to their learning. And I think even those of us that are classified as neurotypical, which I think that everyone would say that I fall there, those things can affect my learning as well, right? So if something's smelly and you're not thinking, what am I learning right now? Like, what is that odor, right?
What is that?
If I'm smelling that smell 10 times more what a neurotypical person is, there's no way for my brain to process any other information. So I think that's what is so important right now, is people understanding that this goes beyond autism. It goes beyond ADD or ADHD, right? Those are the two that everyone attached to neurodiversity. We have a broad spectrum of neurodiversity and a lot of different challenges. And then the most important thing is most people don't have one neurodiversity. So those who are on the autism spectrum almost also always have what are called twice exceptionalities. So they are also, they have sensory integration or sensory processing challenges. They have central auditory processing challenges. All of those things come along with it. So it's a compounded thing a lot of times. And then giftedness is a neurodivergence as well. So if you've got someone who falls on that higher end of the IQ bell curve, right? They process data faster than a neurotypical person. So those are all things that I think need to be considered when we're building training.
It's killer to think how many things we have to take into account to do it well. In the learning and development. And I'm thinking teachers with kids in school. My son, I had my son very young. So my son is just over 50 years old now. And as he went through school, we had gifted, but we did not know what else was going on. And I wish we had, because He's a former teacher and now a learning and development professional.
Yes.
Large organization.
Right.
And so he gets it probably on a far different level than what I do. I don't know if I'm neurotypical. The older I get and the more I learn, I'm like,
Yeah.
But you've learned to cover it. Because I think if you're just a little, you probably can learn the behaviors that like overcome it. Is that I don't, if I'm not saying something right, just correct me.
No, actually there's a term for it. It's called masking. And it's
Beautiful.
Very common in females. So actually, like my daughter, she has now been identified on the spectrum, but that we didn't get that identification until she was 21 years old. Most women, it's something like less than 30% of women their autism diagnosis comes before age 18. Whereas for males, that percentage is much, much higher. And that is actually because the diagnostic criteria for autism is based on male autistic, those who are on the spectrum.
Yeah.
And so we look for the Sheldons of the world, whereas a lot of times we're not looking for the female equivalents. Oftentimes females that are on the autism spectrum disorder are also what we call hyperlexic. So they may, like my daughter, she taught herself to read it too. So they read very early and they read at a highly advanced level. And that's actually, in the secondary education world, that's like, wow, this is amazing, right?
Yes.
And so that is viewed as a positive thing. And it's not a negative thing, but it actually ends up becoming a challenge later in life because they're so hyperlexic that, they never really had to learn information.
Yeah.
Because they're just processing the information that they're picking up so fast. They also might have something called an eidetic memory, which used to be called a photographic memory, right? So that means that, like, used to love it. My daughter she started reading Harry Potter around 5, but she would know the page and the paragraph of where certain things were, right?
Wow.
So say something, she'd like, no, that's not what it said. And she could go right back to where it was. And I would be like, well, okay, I'm wrong.
Yes.
Right. But yeah, you get put in your place. But all of these are things that, especially for a female, is viewed as so positive. And then because females are expected to perform a certain way in our society, that masking becomes part of almost who they are. And there's an inability to see. It's almost accepted for males to be a little neurodivergent, to be those Sheldons. That's kind of cool. But for females, it's not, right? Yeah. So there is a lot of masking that happens.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about the autism spectrum for people that are listening, because, we think of it as the extremes on one end or the other.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So they've changed how they actually diagnose autism spectrum disorder. There used to be something called Asperger's syndrome. That now is very much not viewed positively in the autism space.
Okay.
And so, and I would just say, Google that if you want to know why. We're not going to go there on this call. But so they've made it a spectrum, which I think truly is the best way to look at it. Most everything is, right? And they grade it on a scale of 1 to 10. So 0, no indicators for autism spectrum disorder. 10 is and above is what we call, or what the specialists call, profound autism spectrum disorder. That is more what people think about. So those are the nonverbal children. Those are children that may flap their hands, may sit on the floor and line up cars or blocks or other toys. They may make, echolalia kind of noises, those types of things. But even my daughter, who in her diagnosis is very high on the spectrum, most people that meet her say, well, she doesn't seem autistic at all. And I think, it is because of how much she masks. It is because she does appear very social. She's not one of those kids hiding under the table or, standing in the corner on her phone. She's actually an educator at the Phoenix Zoo. So she's in front of people all day long, loves what she does, loves educating children, works in the day camps and the night camps there. But, all of these are things that we've learned over time she has to accommodate for as she's in different spaces, right? So I think that's what's been most helpful for me as a learning and development professional, is to understand because she'll come home and say, like, I had to go through this training, and mom, here's how, and I think, that wouldn't just be me or you, that would be me too, right?
Right.
So I think all of those are things we have to keep in mind, and we have to realize that it really is a spectrum. But even within that spectrum, each individual is so different in how their autism really kind of presents itself to the world.
And before we go too much further, I just want to invite people to put comments into, whether you're on LinkedIn, Instagram, or YouTube, put comments, and we will do our best to get to those comments. Rosemary, yes, this will be available as a recording. Immediately upon us ceasing the recording today, it goes right out on LinkedIn Live, and I believe it goes out on the other platforms as well pretty quickly. Okay, and yes, right here on YouTube. So there's we have a fantastic assistant, Fawn, in the background.
She's amazing
to be me right now on the comments. So just feel free to ask us any questions, and if we see them, and if we don't, Fawn will let us know. Please do ask questions, and we'll address them live. So let's see. You were saying something there. Talk a little bit about how let's go into the learning and development thing. What kinds of things, when you're designing classes, or maybe you're in the moment and you're facilitating and things may or may not be going as you hope they would, what are some of the things that you would say are great for honoring neurodiversity that we all benefit from?
Yeah, so I would say, first of all, what I call snackable or bite-sized learning, right? Most of us don't have an hour, 2 hours to just sit and watch a training, or even be in a classroom for a training anymore. With today's world, with as fast as we're moving, right, as many things as we're doing on our daily basis, that is just the kind of time we don't have. And so if I can break training down into little 5, 6, 7 minute segments, that I can watch a 5-minute segment and then maybe come back to it later. It also means that if there's a piece of that training that I really need to relearn, I don't have to go back and watch the whole thing all over again. I can watch this piece of it, right? So I think that that's very, very beneficial. I think the other thing is switching there. So when I started in L&D 30 years ago, we were still in overhead projector world, right?
Yes.
You remember that?
I do.
And then just as I was starting to really get into it was when PowerPoint came along. It was the first time I taught myself PowerPoint.
Me too.
Those were the days of massive amounts of clip art on PowerPoint slides.
Yes.
If I look back, it's somewhat embarrassing.
Human beings.
And then we moved into the death by PowerPoint L&D world, right? Where everything was a PowerPoint deck, and the decks were 80 to 90 slides long. Now I would say we've moved into the death by Rise package. If you're familiar with Articulate,
I don't know
that is if you've taken any training online lately, you've probably gone through a Rise package. It's the one where there's usually a picture at the top, and then an introduction to the training, and then you click on the first module and you go through and you flip some cards over and you open some hamburger menus. That's a development tool that almost every L&D professional that I know uses through Articulate. And Rise is kind of PowerPoint on steroids, maybe.
Yeah.
A very amped up version of it, right? It is much, much more interactive than PowerPoint. But now we've gotten to a place where everyone's just developing everything in Rise. And so every training, you're going through 27 new hire onboarding trainings, and they're all Rise packages. So you're flipping cards and, all of that. I think we have to get to the place where learning, and this is true in any kind of learning environment, right, is really that blended learning of, yes, there's a time and a place for some, what I call the foundational knowledge. So if I need to learn, I'm in a new industry and I need to learn the terminology and I need to kind of learn the basics before I dive into it, going through a quick Rise package or watching, a 3 to 4 minute video, something like that, really helps me step into that learning with enough knowledge to grasp it, right? I'm not starting with, wait, what are you talking about? What's happening here? But then a lot of that learning needs to happen hands-on in the actual learning space, right? Where I'm given a chance to actually touch the product or, do the process that I need to do, whatever it is. But also I need to have the capability, the acceptance, and I guess just to be recognized that I will fail, and that failure is actually a better learning than if I'm successful at something the first time.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people will, I say this all the time, training actually becomes demonstrations.
Yes.
So someone will say, right, like in my world, right, if I'm teaching the point of sale where we've got to ring someone up in retail, right?
Right.
I see so many trainers go, okay, let me show you how to do this. So you're going to log in, you're going to scan the product, you're going to do this, you're going to select their coupon, blah, blah, blah. Got it? Okay, great, thanks, bye.
Mm-hmm.
And they call that a training. And I go, that was like a really fast system demo.
Right.
I have no idea what happened, right?
Right.
And so they need to be able to hands-on do it. Okay, yes, that might be the first step. Watch what I do, right?
Right.
Now, I'm going to hand you a product. You ring it up, right?
Yeah.
They're not going to get it right the first time because all you did was demonstrate it. And that's totally fine. They should know. I know you're not going to probably do this perfectly. Don't worry about it.
Right.
But where you make the mistakes, I'll point them out and let's go through it, right? I think all of those are things that have come along more now that we understand from a neurodiversity perspective are important. And then the other big one that I yell all the time, because I work with state regulators so much in my industry.
Oh my goodness.
They to hours, right? So this has to be an hour. This has to be 8 hours. This has to be 12 hours. And I go, why?
Yes.
Why? Because the number of hours that someone sits and learns about something does not mean that they grasp it more than if I condensed that knowledge into an hour, or maybe it's 2 hours, right? But I need to look at it from the perspective of also the corporate world, right? These are folks coming in a lot of times with previous experience in a space. So I shouldn't have to start from
zero,
the 100 level stuff, right?
Right.
College terminology. I need to be able to meet them where they are in the learning space. And I need to be able to recognize that for some people, an hour training might take them 2 hours if they're dyslexic, or if it's a video and they have central auditory processing disorder, they may need more time to process that information. But if I'm profoundly gifted, or I've done this a million times, I might get through that hour-long training in 12 minutes. And that needs to be okay as well, right?
Yes.
So many learning packages now, like even the videos, they're not allowed to speed them up. And I think if just people who are, if people who watch TikTok, I know my daughter watches everything at 2 times plus speed.
Oh, wow.
Just because her brain processes things that quickly, right? I can't.
Wow.
I can't do that. But we need to allow for that in the learning space.
Yes.
We can't stop someone from doing something just because some regulator says, well, this training has to take an hour.
I think it's the old seat time thing, how long is your butt in the seat? And,
very
the continuing ed credits and things like that have sort of fostered that. And, how long are you going to be with them? And then, okay, that gets a credit.
Yes. And, there's one state in particular that we work in that says, it has to be 8 hours of training, and that cannot include breaks and transition times. Like, it literally lists that in the regs. And I'm like, oh, heaven forbid. Like,
Nick,
we would include our break time in our training time.
So an hour for lunch.
Right, exactly. Get an hour for lunch, and you can't count that in your 8 hours of training. So those kinds of things, I think, hinder everybody in their training, not just those, that identify as neurodiverse, who have been identified as neurodiverse. I think that's everyone says, why do I have to sit through 8 hours when I could have gotten, it's like the whole thing of, why do I have to sit in a meeting when this could have been an email?
Yes.
Same concept, right?
Same thing. Yeah. I think I've started coining the term lazy leadership. I think in a lot of cases, we just want to do what we've always done, even though it no longer applies in the world we're in, and with the extra knowledge that we have now that we didn't have 30 or 40 years ago.
Yes.
But so much of when I go to college level classes, there's not universally, but many of them are still in that lecture format. And I'm like, dear God, where's my caffeine? Where's my big red gum that got me through my nighttime degrees? We have another question here. Can you share how the microlearning approach fits into blended learning, when and how to use it?
Yeah, absolutely. So microlearning would be, for example, that introduction. So again, that would be 2 to 3 minutes long, something very short, defining terminology, explaining the process that you're going to learn. In my world, I think the best example I have is cash handling. So in our industry, we have to do something called casino cash handling, which means that every dollar that we receive from a customer has to be placed in front of a camera so that the state can see that we're processing those dollars correctly.
Okay.
And so this is a new concept. Even people who've worked in the retail space before don't generally have to do casino cash handling, right? Where they have to lay the money out in front of a camera, make sure the camera sees it. So if I can do a quick 3 to 4 minute video that says, you know, you're going to do cash handling as you would expect in the retail space. However, it's going to be a little bit different. It's called casino cash handling. And this is what that means. All it means for you is you're going to lay the cash out in front of a camera. You're going to make sure that you count the cash back in front of the camera to the customer and that it's laid out on the counter, those types of things. So that micro learning that starts it, and then I transition into the actually letting the learner be at the point of sale, learning it. That's where I think it comes into play. And I think micro learning is important because it's, you know, along the way, then maybe they come back to the learning and to the learning management system, right? And maybe take some additional micro pieces to it. So they're kind of leveling up in their knowledge or something along those lines.
Yeah. There's a program that I'm a mentor in, and they do a really beautiful job of micro learning and then a live facilitated group thing on Fridays. And and I experienced, it was the first time, you know, for years we've been talking about micro learning, but your girl's a certain age. And so it was always in the classroom. And then, of course, so it tended to be all or nothing. It was all in the classroom live, or it was online live or dead. Like, you know, when you have to take those compliance courses in banking and you're like, dear God, shoot me now.
Right. Yeah.
So, you know, it was one or the other. And it was the first time that I actually participated before I mentored. And I loved it because they had it chunked so I could do as much as I had time for right now.
Yes.
You applied it immediately. And then on Fridays, they would do this live group, and they do enough so that if you hadn't had any time during the week to do it, you weren't left behind.
Yeah.
But you were brought into the conversation with a little top of the line. Here's what you need to know. Now go into a room and talk about it with somebody and come back out and let's do something. They really do a beautiful blended approach.
Yeah. And that's also, I'll just throw in another term. That's also kind of a flipped classroom perspective. So in the past, you know, in a classroom, you sit there, you learn, then you take the test, right? Now in the flipped classroom, it might be, let's do some learning online, but then let's come together and learn, right?
Yes.
So now let's talk about what you learned on your own time when you could, for example, for the neurodivergent, you could be in a quiet space or a space with no overhead lighting or those kinds of things that they really need, right?
Yes.
So that they can focus on the content. And now when we come together, it's not us lecturing to you. It's the educator saying, okay, what did you learn? What questions do you have? How can I support you in this knowledge and information that we're learning? And we're using that a lot at Jushi because again, we're 8 different states across the US. So we don't have the ability to pull people into a classroom and teach them something, right? So a lot of times, like we did a leadership training last year, and all of our leaders would do the e-learning, and then we would come together.
Yeah.
We would take the first 5 to 10 minutes to say, okay, you went through these learnings. This is what it discussed. Now let's apply it.
Yes.
And let's answer any questions.
Yeah. And real life scenarios rather than just hypothetical ones. I think we have another question.
Sure.
Rosemary says, I have a question. I read that 53% of Gen Z is identifying as neurodivergent, and with a multi-generational workforce, how can we retrain managers in this corporate world to hire, retain, and help their employees thrive?
Yeah, so I think that's an excellent question. I really appreciate Rosemary asking it because I think the other thing too that people need to understand is, unfortunately, in our current day and age and our healthcare system, the testing needed to truly be identified either on the spectrum or with the central auditory processing disorder is thousands and thousands of dollars. And it is not covered by insurance.
Oh my. Okay.
So unless a child is identified very, very early within their secondary schooling, where the schools are required to provide that testing, and now what I'm hearing from a lot of parents is schools will do everything they can to not have to provide that testing because of the cost, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if someone like my daughter gets to 21, we have to pay for that. So you're talking $500, $600, $7,500. Who can afford that often?
Right.
So a lot of times you have folks doing what's called self-identifying.
Yes.
There is enough information out there that I think absolutely self-identifying is almost as impactful as, something from a neuropsychologist that says, yes, this person has, they're on the autism spectrum, they have central auditory processing disorder, sensory integration disorder, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Yes, we have that on a piece of paper, but I don't think that piece of paper determines whether or not someone is neurodiverse. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people are realizing, like you said, you know what? Hey, I do learn better when I'm in a quiet space. I don't do well when I'm forced to participate. That's one that I asked my daughter, like, what do you hate? She's like, when you're forced to participate. Because there's also selective mutism for some neurodiverse. So
yes,
it doesn't come out. They just can't even get it out, right? So I think we have to honor all of that, and we have to recognize within that space that it's safe for everyone, and that those folks that are identifying as neurodiverse, we treat them just the same as we would with someone that could hand us a piece of paper from a neuropsychologist or a doctor or something along those lines. But then getting to the leadership perspective, I think what we need to do is recognize that there are so many strengths that come along with neurodiversity.
Oh my gosh, yes.
As a leader, I shouldn't look at that as like, oh, I've got 50% of my employees who might be neurodiverse or identifying as such. We should be going like, ooh,
superpowers.
This is like amazing, right?
Yes.
They think outside the box. They do things in ways that are often, faster, better, because they're processing data and information faster and better. Like, we need to view it from that perspective rather than from the, how am I going to deal with this kind of a thing, right?
Yeah, I think society has done that to folks. They're like, you're different.
Yes.
So you go over there in that classroom, or you do this, or you're singled out. Kids pick on you. They don't include you. They shun you. Yes. All the things happen. Yes. I'm looking for the perfect world where we're all able to be ourselves. And, there are ways that we can self-select into, like, it would be better for me if I did it that way than that way, rather than, like I said, lazy leadership. Deborah's got a good question. Kind of talked about this with my son. Do we have any idea what estimated percentage of Gen X identifies as neurodivergent? I'm definitely in that category, diagnosed later in life, and I'm curious how many others in that generation might be in a similar situation.
It's funny. I'm always looking for numbers, and I think the numbers are constantly changing. I think the only thing I've ever found consistently is that less than 30% of girls are identified before age 18. And now females are being identified, like my daughter, in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond, right?
Yes.
And I think that self-identification is so much more important then.
Yeah.
Because we're realizing, you know what, I have been masking my whole life because I had to present in this way. But it also meant that at the end of the day, I was exhausted. It's also why I get frustrated at certain times, why I shut down at certain times. I think if we begin to recognize those things in ourselves, I don't know that I can give an exact number, but I can say that I think the number is much, much higher than we have honored or recognized to date.
I think it is too. And I started to see some articles about how when women hit perimenopause, which is the period before menopause, which is like, a week of your life, and then you're either peri or you're post.
Right, exactly.
You say you're menopausal, but no.
Right.
And that brings out things in women too. I know for myself, some of the things that I was able to mask before, I can't. It's too hard. Like, life is too short to have to work that hard.
Yes.
Covering something up. So I'm just more myself now than I ever was before, but I'm in my late 60s.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that more people don't have to feel like they have to wait. Why can't we just be ourselves?
Right.
In this world?
Right. And I would actually say one of the positives that came out of COVID is a lot of people realizing as they got to work from home and they got to work in their own spaces at a different pace, without someone standing over their shoulder. What are you doing right now? How long were you at lunch? Da, 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 da,
Yeah.
right? That they're actually much, much more productive. And they come to realize like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how challenging that space was for me.
Right.
Because I've been in that space my whole life, right? We've worked in that corporate environment possibly our whole lives.
Yep.
And so I think especially for women when they came home during COVID and started working, realizing like, oh, but also that, oh, if I get to do these things in my space, in my way, I am exponentially more productive.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is so true. Again, lazy leadership.
Yeah.
It is so, it's so prevalent that work from home was, I mean, there are times when you don't want to work from home. If you're in an abusive place,
Yes.
then you'll be there.
Right.
Your work can be your escape. You can get out. I'm all for hybrid. Let's see what works best for you. Be outcome based rather than I need to see you press a certain amount of buttons in a certain amount of time, because maybe I can do them twice as fast and maybe I'm twice as slow, but far more accurate. Maybe you want to, you know, have me in a different role.
Exactly. It goes to what you said earlier, just about where, you know, where do I want to be in the learning? It's also where do I want to be as I'm working, right?
Yes.
And giving that flexibility, I think, is so important.
So very
important. Some
important.
people need the office space. Also, if I'm a mom and I've got toddlers running around, I want to go to the office for a minute, right?
Yeah.
I remember when my daughter was younger, like
at least a couple of days a week.
Going to the grocery store.
Yes.
So you need that time away. But there are others that working from home is much, much more beneficial than ever sitting in an office.
Yeah. Yeah. I had another speaker on that talks about accessibility for everyone and hidden disabilities.
Yes.
When you have something that, you know, you have a bad day.
Right.
And I've watched friends that are in that situation just get put on performance plans and you know, basically walked out the door because their health or their child's health means that it's hard for them to be physically at work.
Yes.
But if they were home and they could pace it out, they'd be fine. And you would have a great, productive, very loyal worker.
Absolutely.
Because not everybody does that. It's just amazing to me that we don't do things differently than we do things.
Yeah. And if we think about neurodiversity, almost all neurodiversity is a hidden kind of thing. And I don't really like to use the term disability necessarily for that, because a lot of times thinking differently isn't bad. It's just my brain processes data differently, right?
Right.
And even if it processes it slower, that might be better because I'm picking up on things that others don't. You know, because a lot of times people think, well, the people that think faster, that's always better. Well, not necessarily, because
not really.
You know, sometimes people that think slower pick up on things they don't. So I think it, like you said repeatedly, it's just honoring people where they are and recognizing that they may not be comfortable saying something like, I have sensory processing disorder. And so these overhead lights and the buzzing is driving me crazy. And now I have a migraine because of it, right?
Yeah.
That's not always easy to say, or people will be like, ugh, you know, they get the eye roll.
It's so the ugh. Yeah.
They start to quit saying things, right?
Yep.
And sometimes they don't even know why. Like I great example, my daughter, I think in 5th grade, there was one class she kept getting sick in and we couldn't figure out why. And this is the weirdest thing. It turned out it was the lights the teacher had all of these posters that she had covered in the plastic.
Oh, laminated them?
Laminated, thank you.
Yeah.
All of her posters. And so the lights were bouncing off the laminate. It was just like overwhelming for my daughter's system. And it took us forever to figure it out. So sometimes people don't even know why.
Right.
Like, why is it that when I'm at home, I'm fine, but when I'm in the office, I have a headache or things are driving me crazy, right? And then there's just some diagnoses that people don't understand, like central auditory processing disorder.
Right.
Well, what is that? I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
You know, keep working.
Yep. Yeah. Suck it up.
Yeah, suck it up. I think we need to just honor that and allow people the space to say, this is how I learn better.
My hope is that this conversation today gets to somebody who doesn't know what it is, didn't know it was a thing, goes, oh, and starts to like look at things a little differently than they did before. When we were having our pre-conversation, you brought up something about how sometimes the things that come out of neurodiversity can be good for everybody. So you mentioned something about specialized hearing aids for that can help everybody. Do you want to mention something like that?
Yeah, so it's something that after my daughter's autism diagnosis, the neuropsychologist said, and I'm confident that your daughter has something called central auditory processing disorder, but I can't diagnose it. I'm not an audiologist. So then we had to go to an audiology specialist, right? And then it was like, absolutely, yes. And so she got these special hearing aids, and they come with a microphone that, for example, in a classroom can be given to the professor, can either be worn on a clip or on a lanyard. And it literally directs that professor's voice straight into her ears. Same thing if she's sitting at a table in a restaurant. So she cannot process the conversation happening at the table because she can't tune out the noises that are happening around. But she can place that microphone in the center of the table, and it will focus. She can kind of point it at people, and it'll focus the sounds into her hearing aids. The cool part is those hearing aids were outrageously expensive. Now, a lot of smartphones have the same capability. You can buy a separate little microphone to go with your smartphone and use your earbuds. So I think there's a lot of accommodations out there for folks that people aren't aware of. And a lot of people don't even realize they have some of these neurodiversities.
Right.
So I love what you said. If, even one person walks away from this and says, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Now I see, right? That would be huge.
It's either them or their child or their partner or their best friend. Look into it a little bit and figure it out on your, the self-diagnosis. If it's going to be thousands and thousands of dollars, then more of us are going to self-diagnose.
Right.
But reading about it and learning what can overcome something can make all the difference.
Yes.
Well, Rosemary says this is the most inspirational webinar I've attended in years. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, amazing. Oh, and they would like to invite us to speak at one of our Women in Technology in Hollywood events.
Oh my gosh. Yes,
I'm up for
I love it.
I love it. Bring it on. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Rosemary.
Yeah.
So Valerie, we're kind of coming to that time where I ask you, is there anything you'd hoped we would talk about that we haven't done that yet, and you'd like to talk about that now?
I don't think we have. I think what I was most thinking about as we were talking about was the piece we kind of got to was the strengths that neurodiversity brings to the table, right?
Yes.
The thinking outside the box, the ability to really look at something. I think that's one of the best things that neurodiverse folks bring to the table that leaders push back on the most is, leaders, like you said, I've always done it this way. This is what works for me. This is the way we're going to do it. And then a neurodiverse person steps in and goes well, why? Why couldn't we just do this?
Yes.
And a lot of times, if you just did this, it might be better, right? But it's that initial reaction of don't tell me how to do what I'm doing or what I've done for years or whatever.
Years.
Yeah.
Yes.
All of those kinds of things. Absolutely. To me, I think that there's just not a recognition of this creativity that they bring to the workspace, how they view the world differently, and how that different can be better.
Yeah.
And a lot of times how that different can be integrated into how you do things. It's not it's not throw the baby out with the bathwater kind of a thing. It's you don't have to just quit what you're doing, but what if we just did some of this as well, right? So they bring innovation to the table. And it's funny because I think I've had a couple people come up to me when I speak at conferences and say, oh, I worked for IBM and we used to purposefully hire people on the spectrum because they had better focus, they were better coders, et cetera, et cetera. And I think, okay, great. But why is every aspect of the business not thinking about that?
Yeah.
It's not just about the ability to focus on code.
Yeah.
Right. It's about the ability to focus on everything that we're doing within the business space and making it better.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I just think of how learning and development, education in general has had to evolve, how teachers in my day or Gen X's day, you were labeled a behavioral problem. You were back in school because you couldn't keep up if you were dyslexic or ADHD or whatever. And the damage that does to people they never forget.
Yes.
Anytime we other somebody oh, you're not like us, you're over here. it's so traumatic to the psyche, and it happens to kids when they're little, and then they carry it their entire lives. You don't like suddenly get over it and now I'm 70 and it's magic. No, it's still there. So the more we can do to get this word out there, oh my goodness gracious.
Yeah.
It would be great. So if people, I know you do speak at conferences, because I saw sometimes we have friends in common because of some, like weird bridge, like, how do you know her? Oh, I know her too.
Exactly.
So how would people get a hold of you if they wanted to speak to you, have you speak for them? How would they do that?
LinkedIn is the best way. Yeah, I'll be at the Training Industry Conference and Expo in June. So I'll be at TICE, which is one of my favorite conferences that I love to speak at. And I'm speaking on this exact topic, neurodiversity and L&D. So, and that one's just titled How Neurodiversity Benefits All from a Learning and Development Perspective. And that's going to be an interactive facilitated. I'm not going to be standing in front of the group talking to them. We're going to be working together on how they can improve the training within their organizations.
Love it.
So yeah, I speak at conferences all the time. I love, love, love to do it because I think that this is so important. And like you said, if we can get away from that lazy leadership mentality,
yes,
then I think we could all be better. Like the workplace could be better. The workforce could be better. The processes that we have within our work environments could be better. All of that could be improved.
Yeah, definitely. And we did put the industry conference link in the chat.
Yeah. And then, I think is it reach me on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Reach you on LinkedIn. Okay.
Yeah.
Find Valerie on LinkedIn. And of course, if you're in this event, you can easily click on her in the event and find her.
Yeah.
And likewise, me, you can always find me on LinkedIn as well. Anything else that you want to share? Any banners we should put up? I can't remember what we have for you.
No, I think just, again, I think one of the things you said that I love the most is if one person walks away, right? So if anything today resonated with you, like you said, for yourself, for your child, for your partner, for someone that you work with.
Yes.
Now, I would never encourage you to walk up to someone and say, I think you're neurodiverse.
That doesn't fly well.
That doesn't fly well. But what I think you do need to do is understand it. So if you think, is this coworker on the spectrum? Don't go to them and ask, but do some research yourself and find out how can I better interact with this person, right?
Yes.
I think the biggest thing, there's therapies now that are controversial within the autism space, which is where we force the children to look us in the eye. That can be challenging for those children, but they are picking up just as much, not by looking at us as, that societal requirement of looking someone in the eye.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of bosses have that problem. Well, this employee doesn't look me in the eye when they speak to me. I don't know why that's that important anymore.
Right. And I think it's also come up a lot when I work with probably neurodiverse people that are like in career coaching situations and they're getting ready to interview. That interview can be terrifying.
Oh, right.
Because we honor people who are extroverted, have all the answers, know all the things. And for somebody to sit there quietly and be extremely nervous and not say too much and just answer the question very literally doesn't always get them the job. There's a lot of people that are so capable and not getting hired because of neurodiversity or other things.
Yeah. So, my daughter will tell you if there's anything she hates on this planet, it's small talk. She hates it.
And I love it. So.
If you want to talk about something that you want to talk about bats, she will talk to you for hours, right? So it's all about meeting them where they are, but also understanding the strengths that they bring to the table.
Yeah.
I think about interviews, clothing. For a lot of neurodiverse, certain clothing they have to wear to be comfortable, to actually be able to function, and forcing them into a starched shirt and a jacket or something along those lines can trip things up a lot. So we have to honor that.
We really do. We really do.
Yeah.
So I think we're at the end of our time, but I want to thank you because I've had a wonderful time in this conversation. And I know that people that are watching or will watch later are thinking the same thing. Thank you, Valerie, for being on this.
Thank you, Laurie.
And, I couldn't think of a better guest for Wake Up Live and Wake Up Call Live. So thank you, everybody, for coming, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks.
Welcome.